The auction block stood in the center of Bentonville, Arkansas, and Hannah Lancaster knew she would never forget the smell of sawdust mixed with shame as her own father pushed her forward with calloused hands that had once cradled her as a child. It was 1878, and the late summer heat pressed down on the crowd like a physical weight, making the air shimmer above the dirt streets where men in dusty boots and wide-brimmed hats gathered to inspect merchandise, both human and otherwise. Her father refused to meet her eyes as the auctioneer, a portly man with a waxed mustache, began reading the terms of her indenture contract in a voice that carried across the square. 7 years of servitude to pay off her family's gambling debts. 7 years of her life sold to the highest bidder while her mother stood in the shadows of the general store, wringing her hands but saying nothing, doing nothing, being nothing but another witness to Hannah's humiliation. Hannah stood there in her faded calico dress. The one she had mended so many times the fabric was more patches than original cloth, and felt the weight of dozens of eyes assessing her worth like she was livestock. She was 20 years old, with dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders and green eyes that burned with suppressed fury. The auctioneer droned on about the contract terms, about how she could read and write, how she could cook and clean and sew, listing her skills as if they were features of a horse being sold at market. Men called out questions about her temperament, her health, her ability to work long hours, and each inquiry felt like another nail in the coffin of her dignity. The bidding started low, insultingly so, and Hannah felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger. A saloon owner offered first, and the leer on his face made it clear what kind of work he had in mind. A rancher followed, then a merchant who already had 3 indentured servants and was known for working them half to death. The numbers climbed slowly, reluctantly, and Hannah wondered which fate would be hers, which form of misery she would endure for 7 endless years while her family used the money to pay off debts her father had accumulated at poker tables and whiskey bars. Then a voice cut through the noise, deep and steady and calm as still water. $500. The crowd fell silent. $500 was more than double the current bid, more than anyone expected a labor contract to fetch. Hannah's gaze snapped to the source of the voice and found a man standing at the edge of the crowd, tall and lean with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of a stormy sky. He wore dusty trail clothes, leather chaps over worn denim, and a hat that had seen better days. A revolver sat on his hip, well used but well maintained, and everything about him spoke of hard work and harder miles. He looked to be around 25, with strong features and a jaw shadowed with several days of stubble. The auctioneer recovered first, his eyes lighting up with greed. $500 from the gentleman in the back. Do I hear $550? The silence stretched. The saloon owner shook his head and stepped back. The rancher spat in the dirt and walked away. No one was fool enough to compete with a bid that high for an indenture contract. $500 going once, the auctioneer called. Going twice. He paused dramatically. Sold to the Cowboy for $500. Hannah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The stranger who had just bought 7 years of her life was already moving forward, pulling a thick envelope from his vest pocket. She watched in numb disbelief as he counted out the money in crisp bills, far more cash than she had ever seen in one place. Her father rushed forward to collect it, finally meeting her eyes for just a moment, and she saw something that might have been regret before greed won out, and he snatched the money from the auctioneer's hands. The Cowboy took the contract from the auctioneer, folded it carefully, and tucked it into his pocket. Then he turned to Hannah, and she braced herself for whatever came next. Would he gloat? Would he lay out his expectations right here in front of the whole town? Would he drag her off to whatever ranch or claim he worked instead? He simply said, "Come with me, please." The please surprised her more than anything else that had happened. She had not expected courtesy. She had not expected to be treated like a person rather than property. Numbly, she followed him through the parting crowd, aware of eyes watching, tongues already wagging with speculation and gossip. Her family had disappeared, probably already counting their blood money, and Hannah felt a fierce surge of hatred for them that nearly brought tears to her eyes. The cowboy led her down the main street, past the saloons and shops, the blacksmith and the livery. He did not speak, did not look back to see if she followed, simply walked with the easy stride of a man who spent most of his life on his feet or in a saddle. They reached the edge of town where a horse waited, a sturdy bay gelding with intelligent eyes, and a saddle that had been maintained with obvious care. Then, right there in the fading afternoon light, the cowboy reached into his pocket and pulled out the contract. Hannah watched as he unfolded it, the paper crisp and official looking with her name written in careful script across the top. Her heart pounded in her chest. Was he going to read her the terms? Was he going to outline the rules she would live under for the next 7 years? He pulled a match from his pocket, struck it against his belt buckle, and held the flame to the corner of the contract. Hannah gasped. "What are you doing?" He did not answer, just held the paper as the flame caught and spread, consuming the words that bound her to servitude. He held it until the fire threatened to reach his fingers, then dropped it to the dirt and watched as it curled and blackened and turned to ash. The wind picked up, scattering the remains across the dusty ground until nothing remained but smudges of soot. "You are free," he said simply, his voice low and rough like gravel. "That contract is gone. You owe me nothing." Hannah stared at him, unable to process what had just happened. "I do not understand. You just paid $500. I did. And now you burned the contract. I did. Why?" The word came out as barely more than a whisper. He finally looked directly at her, and she saw something in his eyes that she had not expected. Kindness. Because no person should be bought or sold. Because what your family did was wrong. Because you deserved better than what was about to happen to you. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She had not cried on the auction block, had not given anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break, but this unexpected mercy shattered her composure completely. She covered her face with her hands and wept, all the fear and shame and rage pouring out in great heaving sobs. The cowboy did not try to touch her or comfort her, just stood there quietly and let her cry. When she finally got control of herself, gasping for breath and wiping her face with her sleeve, he offered her a handkerchief. It was clean but worn soft from many washings. "Thank you," she managed. "You are welcome." He paused. "My name is Mason Ashford. I have a ranch about 15 miles north of here. Small operation, just me and a few hands. I came to town for supplies." "Hannah Lancaster," she said, then corrected herself bitterly. "Though I suppose I should disown that name after what they did." "Family can be complicated," Mason said carefully, "but the name you were born with is yours, whatever they have done." Hannah looked back toward the town, toward the people who should have protected her and instead sold her like cattle. "I have nowhere to go, no money, no prospects. The contract might be burned, but the debts are real. If I stay in Bentonville, if my family finds me, they will just sell me again. And next time you will not be there to buy my freedom." Mason was quiet for a long moment. "I have a proposition, not a contract, not servitude. An honest job offer that you are free to accept or decline. I need someone at the ranch who can cook and keep the place livable. My hands are good men but hopeless at anything domestic. The place is falling apart from neglect. I can offer you room and board plus wages. Fair wages, same as I pay my ranch hands. You would have your own quarters, your own space. No obligations beyond honest work, and you would be free to leave whenever you chose. Hannah studied him, searching for the catch, for the hidden trap. Men did not do what he had just done. They did not burn $500 just to free a stranger. They did not offer honest work to women with no references and nothing to their name. Why are you helping me? Because I can. Because it is the right thing to do. He met her eyes steadily. Because 3 years ago someone helped me when I had nothing, and I swore I would pay that kindness forward when I had the means. Now I do. She wanted to believe him. Every instinct screamed at her to be cautious, to be suspicious, but the evidence was literally ash at her feet. He had already freed her when he could have owned her for 7 years. If he meant her harm, he had strange ways of showing it. I will take the job, Hannah said finally, but I meant what I said. If this is some trick, if you think burning that contract means I owe you something beyond honest work, I will find a way to leave. Understood, and I mean what I said. You are free. The job is just a job if you want it. Mason swung up into his saddle with easy grace, then offered her his hand. We should leave before dark. The ranch is a few hours' ride. Hannah hesitated only a moment before taking his hand and letting him pull her up behind him. She had ridden double before, had spent her childhood on farms and ranches before her father's gambling had destroyed everything. She settled behind Mason, acutely aware that this was the closest she had been to a man in years, that she had to hold onto his waist to keep from sliding off the horse's back. He did not comment on it, just clicked to the horse and guided them out of town at an easy trot. Hannah looked back once and saw Bentonville receding behind them, the town where she had been born, where she had been raised, where her family had betrayed her in the most fundamental way. She felt no sadness at leaving, only a strange hollow emptiness where her heart used to be. They rode in silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The landscape rolled out around them in gentle hills covered in prairie grass and scattered oak trees. It was beautiful in a stark, lonely way, and Hannah found herself breathing easier the farther they got from town. The summer heat was beginning to fade with the approaching evening, and a breeze carried the scent of dry grass and distant water. You have family at the ranch? Hannah asked finally, breaking the silence. No, my parents died of fever when I was 16. No siblings, no wife, no children, just me and the land and the cattle. I am sorry about your parents. It was a long time ago, he paused. What about you, besides the family that just sold you? Hannah's jaw tightened. I have nothing to say about them. They are dead to me now, truly dead in every way that matters. That is your right. He guided the horse around a cluster of rocks. But I am sorry they put you in that position. I am sorry they failed you. The simple acknowledgement of the wrong done to her threatened to bring fresh tears. Hannah blinked them back fiercely. She had cried enough for one day. Tell me about the ranch. What should I expect? Mason seemed to welcome the change of subject. 300 acres, about 100 head of cattle right now. I have 2 full-time hands, both good men. Tom Rivers has worked for me since I started the place 3 years ago. He is around 50, been cowboying his whole life. Jake Patterson is younger, maybe 22, eager but still learning. We run a clean operation, honest work, fair pay. The ranch house is modest but solid. 2 bedrooms, a main room, kitchen. There is a bunkhouse where Tom and Jake sleep. I was thinking you could have one of the bedrooms in the main house. I will take the other. More proper that way. You do not have to give up space for me. I can sleep in the barn or the bunkhouse. No. His voice was firm. The bunkhouse is no place for a woman, and the barn even less so. You will have a proper room with a proper door that locks. That is not negotiable. Hannah felt a flicker of something warm in her chest. Gratitude, perhaps, or the first stirrings of hope. All right, thank you. They rode on as the stars began to emerge overhead, brilliant and countless in the darkening sky. Hannah had forgotten how beautiful the night could be away from town, away from the smoke and noise and press of people. She found herself relaxing against Mason's back, no longer quite so rigid with tension and suspicion. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Of course." "The person who helped you 3 years ago, what did they do?" Mason was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "I had just lost my parents, and I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a horse I could barely afford to feed. I was trying to start this ranch with money I did not have and knowledge I was still learning. A man named Samuel Carter owned the land next to where I was trying to build. He saw me struggling, saw me half starving, and he offered me work. He taught me about ranching, about cattle, about how to survive out here. When I had saved enough to buy my first 10 head of cattle, he sold them to me at cost and fronted me the money for the rest. He never asked for anything in return except that I pass the kindness along when I could. Is he still your neighbor? He died last year. Heart gave out in his sleep. He had no children and his wife had passed years before, left the whole ranch to me in his will." Mason's voice was thick with emotion. "I owed him everything, still do. So when I saw you on that auction block today, when I saw your father selling you like you were nothing, I thought about Sam. About how he saw someone who needed help and just helped. No questions, no expectations, just kindness because he could afford to be kind." Hannah's eyes burned with unshed tears again. "He sounds like a good man, the best I ever knew." They fell silent after that, but it was a comfortable silence now, the kind shared between two people who understood each other on some fundamental level. Hannah found herself studying what she could see of Mason in the growing darkness. The strong line of his shoulders, the easy way he sat in the saddle, the gentle hands on the reins. He was handsome, she realized, in a rough, weathered way. But more than that, he was kind. And kindness was far rarer than beauty. Full dark had fallen by the time they reached the ranch. Hannah could not see much in the starlight, just the dark bulk of buildings and the fence line of corrals. Mason guided the horse to a barn, dismounted, and helped her down. Her legs were stiff from the long ride and she stumbled. He caught her elbow, steadying her, then let go as soon as she had her balance. "Let me get Copper settled, then I will show you the house," he said, leading the horse into the barn. Hannah followed, watching as he efficiently unsaddled the gelding, rubbed him down, and made sure he had feed and water. Everything was done with practiced ease and genuine care for the animal. She found herself revising her opinion of Mason Ashford yet again. He was not just kind, he was good. There was a difference. The ranch house was small but sturdily built of logs and rough-hewn planks. Mason lit a lamp as they entered, and warm light spilled across a main room that was cluttered but not dirty. Books lined shelves along one wall. A stone fireplace dominated another. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything showed signs of heavy use but also careful maintenance. "Kitchen is through there," Mason said, pointing to a doorway. "Your room is here." He opened a door to reveal a small bedroom with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window with actual glass panes. "It is not much, but the roof does not leak and the door has a bolt on the inside. My room is on the other side of the main room. The privy is out back about 50 yards. Hannah stepped into the room and set her hand on the dresser. It was solid, real. "This is more than I expected, more than I deserve after today. You deserve far better than what happened to you today." Mason's voice was firm. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you have no reason to trust me. But I swear to you, Hannah Lancaster, you are safe here. I will never raise a hand to you, never force you into anything you do not want, never treat you as anything less than a person worthy of respect. You have my word on that, and I do not give my word lightly." She turned to face him, this stranger who had burned $500 to set her free, who was giving her shelter and safety and asking nothing in return. "I believe you. I do not understand why you would do all this, but I believe you mean what you say. That is enough for now." He moved back toward the main room. "There is food in the kitchen if you are hungry. Nothing fancy, but there is bread and cheese and some preserved vegetables. Help yourself to whatever you need. We will talk more in the morning about the job, about what you are comfortable doing. For tonight, just rest. Mason," he turned back at her voice, "thank you for everything, for the freedom, for the job, for the kindness. I will not forget it." He nodded once, his expression serious. "You are welcome. Sleep well, Hannah." She waited until she heard his bedroom door close before she allowed herself to truly breathe. Alone in this small room with a door that locked, she finally felt safe for the first time since her father had told her coldly that she was going to be sold to cover his debts. She lay down on the bed, fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling, processing everything that had happened in the course of a single day. She had been betrayed by her family, sold like property, and then freed by a stranger. She had a job, a roof over her head, and a promise of safety from a man who seemed to actually mean what he said. It was too much to fully comprehend, too much emotion to process. So she let herself drift, exhaustion finally claiming her as she fell into a dreamless sleep. Morning came with sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of voices outside. Hannah sat up, momentarily disoriented, before the events of yesterday came flooding back. She was at the Ashford ranch. She was free. She had a job if she wanted it. She stood and looked down at herself, at the same dress she had worn on the auction block. It was the only thing she owned now. Her family had not even given her a chance to collect her belongings before dragging her to town to be sold. She had nothing but the clothes on her back and the shoes on her feet. A knock on her door made her jump. "Hannah," Mason's voice muffled through the wood. "I am leaving food and some clothes outside your door. They belong to Sam's wife, Martha. She passed before I knew them, but Sam kept her things. I think you are about the same size. Take what you need." She waited until she heard his footsteps retreat before opening the door. True to his word, there was a plate of food and a stack of folded clothes. Hannah brought them inside and examined the garments. Simple dresses, practical and well-made. A few blouses and skirts, undergarments, even a nightgown. She felt tears prick her eyes again at this continued generosity. She ate the food, simple fare of eggs and bread, but delicious to her empty stomach. Then she changed into one of the dresses, a blue calico that fit reasonably well if a bit loose in places. It felt strange wearing a dead woman's clothes, but Martha Carter would never need them again, and Hannah needed them desperately. When she emerged from her room, Mason was sitting at the rough wooden table in the main room, going over what looked like ledgers. He looked up as she entered, and something flickered in his eyes when he saw her in the new dress, but he just nodded approvingly. "It fits well enough. Help yourself to any of Martha's things you can use. She would have wanted them to go to someone who needed them." He closed the ledger. "Did you sleep all right? Better than I expected." Hannah looked around the room, seeing it properly in daylight now. It was cluttered with the evidence of a man living alone. Dishes stacked by the kitchen pump, clothes draped over chair backs, books left open on tables. "Where do you want me to start?" Mason looked confused. "With the work. You said you needed someone to keep the place livable." "Hannah, you just got here last night. You just went through hell yesterday. You do not need to start working immediately." "I want to," she said firmly. "I want to be useful. I want to earn my keep. I cannot just sit in that room and think about yesterday. I need to do something." Mason studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. If that is what you want. The kitchen is a disaster. The whole house could use a thorough cleaning. There is a root cellar that needs organizing. The garden behind the house has gone to weeds. Take your pick, but pace yourself. This is not indentured servitude. This is a job, and no one expects you to work yourself to death." Hannah chose the kitchen first, needing the familiar comfort of domestic work to ground herself. She spent the morning scrubbing and organizing, finding homes for things, washing dishes and wiping down surfaces. Mason came and went, checking on her periodically but not hovering. He seemed to understand that she needed this, needed to feel useful and in control of something after yesterday's powerlessness. Around midday, two men came to the house for the noon meal. Mason introduced them as Tom and Jake, the ranch hands he had mentioned. Tom was indeed around 50, weathered and lean with kind eyes and a cautious manner. Jake was younger, sandy-haired and eager, with the kind of smile that came easily and often. Both men looked surprised to see Hannah, and their eyes went immediately to Mason with questions they did not voice. Mason simply introduced her as the new housekeeper and cook, and both men had the good manners not to pry. They ate the simple meal Hannah prepared with evident appreciation, thanked her sincerely, and headed back to whatever work occupied them. "They are good men," Mason said after they left. "They might be curious about how you came to be here, but they will not gossip. Tom especially does not tolerate that kind of talk." Hannah was washing dishes at the pump. "Will you tell them the truth?" "Only if you want me to. Your story is yours to tell or not tell as you see fit." She appreciated that more than she could say. The last thing she wanted was pity or scandal following her to this new place. "Thank you. I would rather it not be common knowledge that I was sold by my family." "Then it will not be." The afternoon passed in more cleaning. Hannah tackled the main room, creating order from chaos, finding places for books and clothes and the accumulated debris of a man living alone. She discovered that Mason was a reader, his shelves filled with everything from technical manuals on cattle, ranching to poetry to novels. She found herself curious about him, this quiet man who had upended her life in the space of an afternoon. That evening, Mason cooked dinner, insisting that she had done enough for her first day. They ate together at the wooden table, a simple meal of beans and salt pork and cornbread. The silence was companionable, easy. "You did not have to do all this," Mason said, gesturing at the transformed main room. "I meant it when I said you could take time to settle in. I needed to do something. I needed to feel useful." Hannah set down her fork, "And I wanted to. You have given me so much. The least I can do is earn my wages honestly. You have already earned them just by the kitchen alone. I have been living like a bachelor for too long, and it shows." Hannah smiled slightly. "I noticed." They fell into an easy routine over the following days. Hannah threw herself into the work of transforming the ranch house from a bachelor's cluttered space into a proper home. She scrubbed and cleaned and organized. She cooked proper meals instead of the rough fare Mason and his hands had been subsisting on. She started working on the garden, pulling weeds and trying to salvage what vegetables remained. Mason was gone most days, working the ranch with Tom and Jake. But he always came back for the noon meal and again in the evening, and Hannah found herself looking forward to those times. They would eat together and talk, gradually learning about each other through small revelations and quiet conversations. She learned that Mason had taught himself to read from his mother's books, that he had a gift with horses, that he loved this land with a fierce, possessive pride. She learned that he was lonely, though he would never admit it directly, that the ranch was his entire world, and he had poured everything he had into making it succeed. He learned that Hannah had wanted to be a teacher before her father's gambling destroyed that dream, that she loved reading as much as he did, that she had a quick wit and a sharp tongue when she felt safe enough to use it. He learned that she was stronger than she looked, that the betrayal by her family had cut deep but not broken her, that she was determined to build a new life from the ashes of the old. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Hannah settled into the rhythm of ranch life, rising with the sun, working through the day, falling asleep to the sound of crickets and distant cattle. She found herself healing in small ways, the raw wound of her family's betrayal beginning to scar over if not fully heal. She also found herself increasingly aware of Mason, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, which was more often now, the sound of his laugh, rare but genuine, the strength in his hands when he helped her move something heavy, the gentleness when he handed her a cup of coffee he had made the way she liked it, the way he treated her with unfailing respect and kindness, never presuming, never taking advantage, always keeping his distance even though they lived in the same house. It was confusing and frightening and exhilarating all at once. Hannah had never had time for romance, had been too focused on survival, and then too busy being sold by her family. She did not know what to do with these feelings that were growing inside her like the garden plants she was nursing back to health. One evening, about a month after she had arrived, Hannah was sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Mason joined her. He settled onto the steps beside her, close but not too close, his presence warm and solid in the cooling evening air. "I have been thinking," he said after a while. "About what?" "About you. About how you have transformed this place in just a month. The house actually feels like a home now instead of just a place I sleep between work days." Hannah felt warmth bloom in her chest. "I am glad. I like the work. I like being useful." "You are more than useful." Mason turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious in the fading light. "You have become essential. To the ranch, yes, but also to me. I find myself looking forward to coming back to the house, to seeing what you have done, to talking with you over meals. I find myself happier than I have been in years." Her heart began to pound. "Mason, I am not saying this to make you uncomfortable. I am not expecting anything. I just wanted you to know that you are appreciated here, that you are valued, not just as a housekeeper but as a person. As Hannah." She swallowed hard against the lump in her throat. "You have given me my life back. I do not know how to repay that. You do not owe me anything. You never did." He looked back at the sunset. "But I would like to think we have become friends at least. Friends." Hannah tested the word, found it both accurate and insufficient. "Yes, I would like that." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and stars began to emerge. Hannah felt something shift between them, some subtle change in the nature of their relationship. They were not just employer and employee anymore. They were not just two people sharing a house. They were something more, something undefined but growing stronger every day. The following weeks brought change to the ranch. A late summer storm blew through, fierce and sudden, bringing rain that turned the dusty yard to mud and wind that tore at the buildings. Hannah and Mason worked together to secure the animals, to reinforce the barn door, to make sure nothing was damaged beyond repair. They ended up soaked to the skin and laughing despite the chaos, running through the rain like children. Inside the house afterward, both dripping on the floor, Mason caught Hannah's eye and they both burst out laughing again. She could not remember the last time she had laughed so freely, so completely. The sound filled the house like music. "We should get into dry clothes before we catch our death," Mason said, still grinning. Hannah agreed, but as she turned to go to her room, he caught her hand gently. She looked back at him, her breath catching at the expression on his face. He looked like he wanted to say something, wanted to do something, but was holding himself back with visible effort. "Hannah," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with significance. Hannah felt her heart stop and then start again, racing. "Mason, You do not have to say anything. I know this is complicated. I know you work for me, that there is a power imbalance there. I know you have been through hell and might not be ready for anything like this. I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest with you." She searched his face, seeing the vulnerability there, the fear of rejection, the hope he was trying to contain. "You are falling in love with me," she repeated, testing how the words felt. "Yes. Even though I came here with nothing, even though my own family sold me, even though I am just your housekeeper, you are not just anything." His voice was fierce now. "You are brilliant and strong and kind. You are the woman who turned this house into a home, who makes me look forward to every day, who challenges me and makes me laugh and makes me want to be better. Your past does not define you, Hannah. Your family's actions do not diminish your worth." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I have been for weeks now. I was just afraid to admit it, afraid it was too soon, afraid I was reading too much into kindness." The relief on his face was palpable. "You are not reading too much into anything. This is real. What I feel for you is real." "What do we do now?" Hannah asked, suddenly uncertain. Mason smiled, soft and tender. "We take it slow. We figure it out together. There is no rush, Hannah. We have time." He was still holding her hand, and she squeezed his fingers gently. "I would like that. Slow sounds good." They stood there in the main room, dripping rainwater onto the floor, holding hands like awkward teenagers. It was not a dramatic declaration or a sweeping romantic gesture. It was quiet and real and perfect. Over the following weeks, their relationship evolved. Mason courted her properly, with a respect and gentleness that made Hannah's heart ache. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie. He took her riding on Copper, showing her the boundaries of his land, the places he loved. He read to her in the evenings, his deep voice bringing stories to life in the lamplight. Hannah found herself opening up in return, telling him about her childhood, about the dreams she had once held, about the slow dissolution of her family as her father's gambling consumed everything. She told him about the betrayal, about standing on that auction block feeling like her humanity had been stripped away. "I will never forgive them," she said one evening as they sat on the porch together. "My mother, maybe, eventually. She was weak, not cruel, but my father, never. He looked me in the eye and sold me like I was livestock. That is not something I can move past." "You do not have to forgive them," Mason said quietly. "Some things are unforgivable, but I hope someday you can let go of the anger, not for their sake, but for yours. Carrying that rage will only poison you." Hannah leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture that had become natural between them. "Maybe someday, but not yet." "Not yet," he agreed and wrapped his arm around her. Jake noticed the change in their relationship before Tom did, being younger and more romantically minded. He grinned at them over the noon meal one day when Mason and Hannah were sitting closer than usual, but he had the good sense not to comment. Tom, when he finally caught on, just nodded approvingly and said, "About time." As autumn approached, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber, Mason began talking about the future. Not in vague terms, but in specifics. He talked about expanding the herd, about building a proper addition to the house, about long-term plans that included Hannah in every aspect. "I want you to know that your place here is permanent if you want it," he said one evening. "Not as an employee, though I will keep paying you fair wages as long as you want them, but as my partner. In the ranch, in my life, in everything. Hannah's breath caught. Mason, are you asking what I think you are asking? He took her hands in his gray eyes intense. I am asking if you would consider a future with me. I am not proposing marriage, not yet. I know we have only known each other a few months, but I want you to know my intentions are serious. I want to build a life with you, Hannah Lancaster. If you will have me. She felt joy bubble up inside her, pure and bright. I want that too. I want a future with you. I want to build something real here, something that belongs to us. He pulled her close and kissed her for the first time, gentle and sweet and full of promise. Hannah melted into him, feeling safe and cherished and loved in a way she had never experienced before. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. We are really doing this, she said wonderingly. We are really doing this. Mason kissed her forehead. Though I should probably warn you, ranch life is hard. There will be lean years and struggles. This is not an easy life I am offering you. I know. But I would rather struggle with you than have comfort anywhere else. You gave me my freedom, Mason. You gave me my life back. But more than that, you gave me hope. You showed me what love is supposed to look like. How could I want anything else? As the weeks passed into months, Hannah and Mason's relationship deepened. They worked side by side, building their future together. Hannah continued managing the house, but she also started learning the ranch work, helping with the cattle when extra hands were needed, learning to ride better, becoming truly part of the operation. She discovered she loved the work, the physicality of it, the connection to the land and animals. She loved working beside Mason, seeing him in his element, watching how he handled problems with calm competence. She loved Tom's dry humor and Jake's enthusiasm. She loved the vast prairie sky and the endless horizon. Winter came, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. The ranch settled into a quieter rhythm. The cattle moved to winter pastures. The work focused more on maintenance and preparation for spring. Mason and Hannah spent more time inside, and the intimacy between them grew. On a cold December evening, with snow falling softly outside and a fire crackling in the hearth, Mason pulled Hannah onto his lap as they sat in front of the fireplace. She went willingly, curling against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I love you, he said softly. I know I have said it before, but I want you to hear it again. I love everything about you, Hannah. Your strength, your kindness, your sharp mind and sharper tongue. The way you transform everything you touch. The way you make this house a home. The way you love me back. I do love you, Hannah said, tilting her head up to kiss him. More than I ever thought possible. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. You saved me too. I did not even realize how lonely I was until you were here. They kissed again, deeper this time, passion building between them. But Mason pulled back before things went too far, his breathing ragged. We should wait until we are married. I want to do this right, Hannah. I want to honor you. Hannah appreciated his restraint even as her body protested. When she asked, when will we marry? Whenever you are ready. Tomorrow, next month, next year. I am not going anywhere. Spring, Hannah decided. After the worst of winter is past, when the world is waking up again, I want to marry you in spring, Mason Ashford. He smiled, and she could see the joy in his eyes. Spring it is. The winter passed slowly but not unpleasantly. Hannah and Mason made plans, talking late into the night about their future. They decided to build an addition to the house, a proper bedroom and eventually space for children if they were blessed with them. They talked about the ranch, about increasing the herd, about building something lasting that they could pass on someday. Hannah also began to heal in deeper ways. The anger at her family faded from a constant burning rage to a dull ache she could mostly ignore. She did not forgive them, perhaps never would, but she found she could think about them without feeling like she was being torn apart. Mason's love had given her something to build on instead of just things to escape from. In February, Mason rode into Bentonville to conduct some business. He asked Hannah if she wanted to come, but she declined. She had no desire to see that town again, no wish to risk running into her family. He understood and did not press her. He returned late in the afternoon, his expression troubled. Hannah met him at the door, immediately sensing something was wrong. "What happened?" Mason dismounted and took her hands. "I heard news in town. Your father is dead. He was killed in a bar fight 3 nights ago over a poker debt." Hannah felt the world tilt. She gripped Mason's hands tighter, trying to process what he had just said. Her father was dead. The man who had sold her, who had betrayed her in the most fundamental way, was gone. "How do I feel about this?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I hated him. I swore I would never forgive him. But he was still my father. Should I be sad, relieved? I do not know what to feel." Mason pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "You feel however you feel. There is no right or wrong here. You can mourn the father you should have had while being relieved that the man who hurt you cannot hurt you anymore." Hannah cried then, great heaving sobs that she did not fully understand. She cried for the father who had once loved her, before the gambling consumed him. She cried for the childhood she had lost. She cried for the betrayal and the pain and the waste of it all. And she cried with relief that she would never have to face him again, never have to reconcile the man she remembered with the monster he had become. Mason held her through it all, strong and steady, his presence anchoring her. When the storm of emotion finally passed, she pulled back and wiped her face. "Thank you for being here, for understanding, always." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "There is more. Your mother and siblings are destitute. Without your father's income, such as it was, they have nothing. The people in town are taking up a collection for them." Hannah felt a flicker of something, not quite sympathy, but not complete indifference either. "And you think I should help them?" "I think you should do whatever feels right to you. They wronged you terribly. You owe them nothing. But if you want to help your mother, if you want to extend that grace, I will support you." Hannah thought about it, really thought about it. Her mother had been weak, complicit in the betrayal through her silence if not her action. But she had also been trapped in her own way, dominated by a cruel man, taught that her role was to submit and obey. Did that excuse what she had done? No. But did it allow for mercy? "I want to help my mother," Hannah said slowly. "Not my siblings, they are old enough to make their own way, but my mother. I want to send her enough money to survive, to have a small income. Not out of love, I do not think I can love her anymore, but because I am better than what they did to me. Because I can afford to be merciful." "You are a better person than most," Mason said softly. "Your mother does not deserve your grace, but I am proud of you for extending it anyway." They sent money to Bentonville, enough for Hannah's mother to establish herself in a boarding house with a small income from sewing work. Hannah did not write a letter, did not offer reconciliation. It was mercy, not forgiveness. Her mother sent back a brief note of thanks that Hannah read once and then burned. Spring came gradually, the snow melting, the prairie coming alive with new growth. Hannah watched the land transform and felt herself transforming with it. She was not the frightened, betrayed woman who had stood on that auction block 9 months ago. She was stronger now, harder in some ways but softer in others. She was loved and she loved in return. She was building something real and lasting. On a warm April morning, Hannah Lancaster married Mason Ashford. It was a simple ceremony, just them and Tom and Jake as witnesses, conducted by a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through. Hannah wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Mason had bought her, pale yellow like spring sunlight. Mason wore his best clothes and looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. They spoke their vows under the vast prairie sky, promising to love and honor each other, to build a life together, to face whatever came as partners. When Mason kissed her as his wife, Hannah felt something click into place inside her. This was home. This was family. This was where she belonged. The wedding night was tender and sweet, both of them nervous but eager. Mason was gentle, patient, taking his time to make sure Hannah felt safe and loved. They came together in the bedroom they now shared, and Hannah finally understood what it meant to give yourself completely to another person, to be vulnerable and cherished all at once. Afterward, lying in Mason's arms in the darkness, Hannah felt profound gratitude for the twisting path that had led her here. The betrayal that had seemed like the end of her life had actually been the beginning of a better one. The auction block had led to freedom. The sale had led to love. "What are you thinking?" Mason murmured, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I am happy. That despite everything that happened, despite all the pain, I would not change it because it brought me to you." He kissed the top of her head. "I think about that day a lot. What made me go into town that specific day? I had not planned to. I was going to wait until the following week. But something made me go right then, made me be there when you needed someone. I do not know if that was fate or God or just dumb luck, but I am grateful for it. I am grateful you listened to that impulse. I am grateful you saw me as a person worth saving. You were always worth saving. You are worth everything." They fell asleep tangled together, husband and wife, partners in all things. The life they had chosen stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise. The years that followed were good ones, though not without their challenges. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. They increased the herd, improved the land, built the addition they had planned. Tom retired after a few years and was replaced by a young man eager to learn. Jake eventually saved enough to buy his own small plot of land nearby, and they remained close friends. Hannah proved to have a natural gift for the business side of ranching. She kept the books, managed the finances, made smart decisions about when to sell cattle and when to hold them. She and Mason were true partners in every sense, their strengths complementing each other perfectly. 2 years after their marriage, Hannah gave birth to their first child, a son they named Samuel after the man who had helped Mason when he had nothing. The birth was difficult, and Hannah labored for nearly a day before their son finally arrived, screaming and red-faced and perfect. Mason wept when he held Samuel for the first time, overwhelmed with joy and love. "We made this," he said in wonder, staring at the tiny face. "We made a person." Hannah, exhausted but radiant, smiled. "We did, and we are going to give him everything. Love, stability, a home he never has to doubt. Everything we did not have." They were fiercely protective of Samuel, determined to give him a childhood full of love and security. Mason was a patient father, teaching his son about the ranch, about the land, about what it meant to be a good man. Hannah was equally devoted, nurturing Samuel's curiosity, teaching him to read early, making sure he knew he was loved unconditionally. 3 years after Samuel came Martha, named for the woman whose clothes had given Hannah a fresh start. Then 2 years after that came Thomas, named for Tom Rivers, who had been such a loyal friend. Their house rang with laughter and noise and the beautiful chaos of family life. Hannah sometimes thought about her birth family, about the mother and siblings she had cut from her life. She heard occasional news through the few connections they maintained in Bentonville. Her mother lived quietly in the boarding house, supporting herself through sewing. Her siblings had scattered, making their own ways in the world. Hannah felt no desire to reconnect, no need to rebuild those broken bridges. The family she had created with Mason was enough, was everything. On their 10th anniversary, Mason took Hannah on a ride across the ranch, just the two of them while Tom's replacement watched the children. They rode to the highest point on their land, where you could see for miles in every direction. The ranch spread out below them, 300 acres grown to nearly 1,000 now. The house expanded and improved, the herd numbering in the hundreds. "I have been thinking about that day," Mason said as they sat on their horses, surveying their domain. "The day I bought your contract and burned it. I think about it often," Hannah admitted. "It changed everything. I want you to know something. I did not buy that contract thinking I would fall in love with you. I did not do it with any expectation of what would come after. I did it because it was right, because you needed help. But I got so much more than I ever expected. You gave me everything, Hannah. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. You took the ranch I was building and helped me turn it into something greater than I could have achieved alone." Hannah reached across the space between their horses and took his hand. "We built this together. The ranch, the family, the life. None of it would exist without both of us. I know. But I want to make sure you know how much you are valued, how much you are loved. Not just by me, but by our children, by everyone whose life you have touched. You are the heart of this family, Hannah Ashford." She felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "And you are its foundation. You saved me, Mason, not just from indentured servitude, but from a life of bitterness and rage. You showed me what love looks like, what family should be. You gave me a reason to hope again." They sat together on that hill as the sun began to set, husband and wife, partners and lovers and best friends. Below them, their ranch waited. Their children played under someone else's watchful eye, their future stretched out full of promise. "You ever regret it?" Hannah asked quietly. "The $500 you burned that day, that was so much money." Mason laughed, the sound carrying across the prairie. "Regret it? Hannah, that $500 was the best investment I ever made. It brought me you. It brought me everything that matters. I would burn 1,000 times that amount if it meant having you in my life. I love you, Mason Ashford. I love you too, Hannah Ashford, today, tomorrow, and all the days after." They rode back to the house as darkness fell, returning to the life they had built together from ashes and determination and love. Their children ran to meet them, Samuel tall and serious at 10, Martha chattering excitedly at 7, Thomas toddling along at 5 trying to keep up with his siblings. Hannah dismounted and swept Thomas into her arms, laughing as he planted a wet kiss on her cheek. Mason took Martha's hand and listened seriously as she told him about some important discovery she had made in the garden. Samuel helped with the horses, competent and careful, showing the same gentle touch with animals his father had. Inside the house, warm with lamplight and the smell of the dinner cooking on the stove, Hannah felt a profound sense of contentment. This was what she had been meant for, this life, this family, this love. The girl who had stood on the auction block all those years ago, terrified and betrayed, could never have imagined this future. But that girl had been stronger than she knew, and she had met a man who saw that strength and honored it. The years continued to pass, bringing the normal trials and joys of life. Samuel grew into a young man much like his father, quiet and steady and honorable. Martha proved to have her mother's sharp mind and business sense. Thomas was the dreamer of the family, always with his nose in a book, or staring at the horizon wondering what lay beyond. Hannah and Mason aged together, their love deepening with every passing year. They faced struggles together, bad years when the cattle market crashed, good years when everything seemed to go right, and all the ordinary years in between. They supported each other through illness and loss, celebrated together through triumphs and milestones. when Samuel married at 23, bringing home a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch. Hannah cried happy tears and thought about how different his life was from hers at that age. He chose his bride freely, loved her genuinely, and was building his own life on a foundation of love and respect. That, more than anything, felt like vindication. Martha left for school in St. Louis at 18, determined to get an education and make her own way in the world. Hannah supported her daughter's ambitions fiercely, giving her the opportunities she herself had never had. Thomas eventually became a veterinarian, his love for animals and desire to help them leading him to study medicine. As Hannah and Mason moved into their later years, slowing down but still active on the ranch, they often sat on the porch in the evenings and talked about their life together. They marveled at the family they had created, at the legacy they would leave behind. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Hannah asked one evening when she was 62 and Mason was 67. "When you burned my contract, I said you were free, that you owed me nothing. And I did not believe you. I thought there had to be a catch, had to be some hidden price. I could not comprehend that someone would do that out of simple kindness." Mason took her hand, his fingers still strong despite his age. "And now I understand. Now I know that sometimes kindness is its own reward. You gave freely because you could, because it was right. And in return, you received more than you could have imagined. We both did. I still say that burning that contract was the smartest thing I ever did. $500 for a lifetime of love. That is quite a return on investment." Hannah laughed and leaned her head on his shoulder, the gesture as natural now at 62 as it had been at 20. "I am glad you were in town that day. I am glad you saw me. I am glad you cared enough to help." "I will be glad for it until my last breath," Mason said softly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Hannah Ashford." They sat together as the stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had watched them fall in love, that had witnessed their wedding, that had shone down on every important moment of their life together. The ranch was quieter now, with Samuel running most of the operation while Mason advised. But it was still theirs, still the place they had built together from nothing. Years later, when they were both in their 70s, Mason fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, then weakness, then a slow decline that all their money and Thomas's medical knowledge could not stop. Hannah nursed him devotedly, refusing to leave his side, determined that he would not face the end alone. On a warm summer evening, with their children and grandchildren gathered around, Mason took his last breath with Hannah holding his hand. She felt a piece of her soul tear away as he left her, felt the loss of him like a physical wound. But even in her grief, she knew gratitude. They had been given decades together, had built a life and family beyond anything either of them had dreamed. Not everyone was so lucky. Hannah lived another 5 years without Mason, surrounded by the family they had created together. She remained sharp and active until near the end, still managing the ranch books, still advising Samuel, still the heart of the family Mason had called her. She told her grandchildren stories about their grandfather, about the man who had burned a contract to set her free, who had shown her what love really meant. When Hannah passed peacefully in her sleep at 79, surrounded by 3 generations of the family she and Mason had built, she went with no regrets. She had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy of kindness and strength that would echo through her descendants for generations. They buried her next to Mason on the hill overlooking the ranch, the place where they had sat on their 10th anniversary and marveled at what they had built. Their graves stood side by side, just as they had lived side by side, partners in everything. On Hannah's headstone, beneath her name and dates, Samuel had arranged for an inscription. She was sold by her own family. A cowboy bought her contract and burned it, giving her freedom. She gave him love in return. Together they built a legacy. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through Samuel's line, each generation adding to what Mason and Hannah had started. The story of how it began, of the auction block and the burned contract and the love that grew from ashes, became family legend. Parents told it to children, who told it to their children, a reminder that kindness matters, that love conquers cruelty, that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead to the best. In the end, Hannah Lancaster, who became Hannah Ashford, had transformed from a woman sold like property into the matriarch of a family dynasty built on love and respect. Mason Ashford had transformed from a lonely rancher into the founder of a legacy that would last for generations. Together, they proved that sometimes the most broken beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. Their story became more than just their own. It became a testament to the power of choosing kindness, to the strength it takes to love after betrayal, to the possibility of building something good even from the worst circumstances. It became a reminder that our past does not have to define our future, that we can choose who we become regardless of where we started. And at the heart of it all was a simple act of mercy. A cowboy who saw a woman in trouble and chose to help, who burned $500 without expecting anything in return, who gave freely because he could. That single choice, made in a moment of compassion, changed two lives completely and echoed through generations. The ranch house still stood 100 years later, expanded and modernized but still recognizable. The land was still worked by Hannah and Mason's descendants. And on the mantel in the main room, preserved in a frame, was a single photograph. A weathered tintype of a young couple, him tall and serious, her beautiful and strong, both of them looking at each other with unmistakable love in their eyes. Below the photograph, written in faded ink on yellowed paper, were the words Mason had spoken on their 10th anniversary. That $500 was the best investment I ever made. It was a love story for the ages, born from the worst of circumstances and growing into the best of lives. It was a reminder that sometimes the person who saves us becomes the person we cannot live without. And it proved that true love, the kind built on respect and partnership and unwavering commitment, can weather any storm and last beyond death itself. Hannah and Mason's story became legend, but more importantly, it became truth. Truth about the power of love, the strength of the human spirit, and the transformative nature of genuine kindness. They had taken a moment of cruelty and betrayal and turned it into the foundation of something beautiful. They had proved that the worst day of your life can lead to the best life you could imagine. And it all started with a cowboy who bought a contract he never intended to enforce, who lit a match and gave a woman her freedom, who asked for nothing and received everything in return. It started with a choice to be kind when the world was cruel, to see a person where others saw property, to act with honor when no one would have blamed him for acting with self-interest. That choice, that moment, that burned contract in the dust of a Bentonville street, changed everything. It created a family, built a ranch, established a legacy that would last for generations. And at the center of it all was love, pure and simple and true, proving that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places.